this is going to be my RJ 1.2, and it was a session that I did in high school around life choices and um, and how they can affect different things. So I'd planned it quite well. Well, I thought I'd planned it quite well. I thought to play a game which would demonstrate different ways of going up. Well, it was a snakes and ladders game, so different ways of going up and down. So I planned it out. I'd done a PowerPoint which had explained all the different terms, and then when we played the game, what I found, and this for me was the most important part of that set of this, was that the girls had demonstrated to me that they understood what the different sort of life choices, life chances, all those different aspects. And they proved to me that they understood that, especially through questioning and through other forms of feedback. But when it came to actually playing the game and understanding that the snakes were the things that impacted us and how that impacted us, and the life choices and chances and all those, the more positive things were the things that went up. So I'd given them each like the different counters were all different things like health or money or education. So I was hoping that they sort of understood that, but actually they were more interested in playing the actual game and not necessarily understanding the thinking behind it. And especially when it came to them finishing, they still didn't really understand what the game was about, and were more interested. Now, I think that there's a couple of reasons for this. Now, I always like to use a sort of cycle model of reflection, so learning from it. I suppose for me it's more about learning from experience. So experiential, like learning and then reflecting and then trying it again. So, well, I think there's a couple of reasons why it wasn't that good. I don't think it has anything to do with the planning. I think that group that I was working with at that time, I think they've got this thing about not any other teacher apart from their normal teacher who is really experienced but has worked with this group of young people for 5 years, 6 years, and I think they're very territorial, and they don't like anybody new coming in who they think might be taking over from the teacher. Now, I'd made it clear, and this had been going on for a few weeks before, so I think there was this, for me, I felt I was always up against never being as good as their teacher, who was a really experienced teacher whose practice is incredibly good. So for me, I think that was half the battle, in that they didn't want to learn and they didn't want to take on board what I'd said. I think on the flip side of that, I think maybe I didn't explain it and maybe I didn't create the rules well enough for them to be able to understand that. So I think if I was to do it again, I would change it. I would explain it in a different way. I would maybe make sure that right at the beginning they were really, really short and really clear, and I would go through the game step by step with them, just to make sure that they really understood that. But for me, the most baffling thing was, and it's the thing, even going back now and looking at it, is the bit that I'd really planned it out and I'd really thought it through, and it just felt that I was up against something else that wasn't necessarily about the planning. I think it was something else. So for me, the thing that I want to take away from that session wasn't that it was really, really good. It was that sometimes things can go wrong and we've got to learn from that and how we can move on. That sometimes there's other things in there that we just can't get over, or it would take a lot longer to get over than a couple of sessions or a couple of lessons. It's something that would take a really long time. and also that sometimes the best thought plans don't always turn out, and so thinking on your feet and being able to change that is really important. But when it came down to it, they enjoyed the game, but they didn't understand what it was about. And for me, that's not what that lesson was about. So I need to. That's why on reflection, I think there's more than just one factor in there, and I would like to do it again with them, and just see how they take that on board. And the other thing is when I was discussing it with the teacher at the end, I bumped in, or not at the end, but I bumped into her a couple of lessons later, or a couple of weeks later, and what she said is that the group as a whole was struggling with that subject. So in some ways, it wasn't my exercise or activities or the things that we were doing. It wasn't that. It was just that they were really struggling to grasp that subject, and maybe my inexperience of being in that classroom or in that formal learning environment really shone through, because I suppose it was quite early on in my teaching. It was in October of my second year where I was trying something different, where I was going into schools and things. So for me, that they were the points.